Well, we get into our big stories this morning, and we're talking about matters that affect you. We start with utility tariffs and ECG, the Ghana Water Company Limited, both of them wanting to up their tariffs. The ECG looking at 148% thereabouts, the Ghana Water Company Limited 344%, on the back of a gap that they have found in terms of delivering what they are expected to deliver. So how do we strike a balance? I was having a discussion earlier about their output as well. There are still places in this country who are not connected or which are not connected to the electricity grid, places without water. Well, joining us for that discussion, we have Fritz Moses, energy analyst with the IES. He joins the conversation. We'll be joined by other guests, but here in the studio as well, Bernice Abubedu-Lanza joins the conversation.
Good morning to you.
I'll start with you. You know, like I mentioned, in the 21st century, there are places in Ghana without electricity supply. You know what that means? You probably won't even have internet connectivity because where are you going to charge your gadgets and all of that? And then I recall in the OT region, just a month back, we had a story where the water people were drinking, you wouldn't even give to your pet. You know, I'm sorry I have to use that analogy, but that is our reality. On the other hand, we also have those who are circumventing the process of they are getting electricity, they are consuming water, they are not paying for it. So many dynamics to look at when it comes to this bit here.
Okay, so there are two legs to this. There's the ECG and the Ghana Water Company Limited saying that people are not paying enough.
Right.
For what we give them. That's one leg of the problem, okay? And even you were talking about extending power to underserved areas. And the ECG says, look, we even undertake some of these projects and it costs us money. So it all comes down to how much you're putting into what you get and how much you're giving us back, okay? Then there's also the issue of waste, like you just said. So water, for example, I was driving home sometime last week, and there was this pipe which was burst, and the people say that, look, this has been happening for so long. I've seen people put up photos on Facebook saying, Ghana Water Company Limited, we've reached out to you. All the water is going waste. So there's a lot of waste in the system. So there are people who are not paying for what they use. There are people who, what we call illegal connections. And there's so much. And there's also the bit on the government side. Recently, we heard of some state institutions, there were threats to cut their power because they owe the electricity company of Ghana so much, and government agencies are not paying them. So I honestly feel that managers of these two service providers are actually very frustrated. But let's hear from the experts.
But even before we get to Fritz, there's also the angle of when it comes to ECG. They say we have much more capacity than we need. It appears, I mean, not technically, because I have always felt, if you have excess capacity, what do you do? I mean, rational economic choices. You have 10 chocolates, you can only consume 2. What do you do with the 8? You might exchange them for other goods you need in a barter system. You may sell them off, get money, and use them. Why aren't we able to sell? Why aren't we able to? Because if we had also industrialized better, it would feed into, you know, the economy and all of it. So many things. And especially when you have large swathes of, you know, territory in your country without electricity connection or connectivity, how does that make any logically? But let's start our engagement with Fritz.
All right, good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So the Electricity Company of Ghana is saying that, look, over the years, you've not paid enough. Even for this increments they want, is to cover 2019 to 2022. So it takes retrospective effect. What is our problem in this country when it comes to paying the right amount for the services that we are receiving?
Thank you once again. I like your question. What's our problem on paying when it comes to paying the right amount? I mean, that's the position we've taken now. That Ghana, it seems we tend to politicize almost everything, including electricity tariffs, and that's the main problem. And the reason why we are seeing the current charges or figures that we are seeing. I mean, we understand and believe that for years past, somewhere 2017 onwards, we should have seen some major electricity tariff review. But our position is that due to those political interferences and issues that came up, we haven't been able to see those reviews since 2017. And so the current figures, like DCC has stated, is a reflection of what they should have done in 2019 and in years past. And that's a very important situation where we consistently have to see or get to experience political interference in the determination of the tariffs and other tariffs, which of course tends to affect the ability of these operators, ECG, NEDCO, VRA, to actually do the work that they're supposed to do.
It's interesting you talk about the politicization of utility tariffs. Reminds me of this government when it assumed power in its first 4 years. There were some reductions, and people criticized that, saying you can't do that because we are not even getting enough for what we're producing. Here you are subsidizing it, but it was a promise that had to be fulfilled.
And we have a history in the past, in the Rawlings era, when it comes to subsidies. At a point, we had to say jettison them because they are not realistically the way to go.
Okay, so first, Moses, there's also the element of wastage, which I was just discussing with my colleague here. So here we are as a people, we are not paying enough already for what we are served. Then there are others in the system who are connecting illegally, using the power illegally. Government agencies not paying for the right amount of for the power that they consume, and this is all adding to the stress of the utility providers. How do we go about this? Because we've been having this discussion for years on end.
Exactly. I mean, I agree with you totally. I mean, coming on the back of the tariffs, we realized in 2017 where we were charging around, even the highest we have ever charged was somewhere 2016 where we were charging around 80 pesos for a kilowatt per hour of electricity. 2018 we saw that reduced to about 70 pesos, was increased to 71 pesos and 74 pesos in 2020. And these were minor reviews that were essentially not enough for the various operators, ECG and NEDCO, to stay in business. In last year, we reported how much losses NEDCO was reporting each year due to its transmission losses, which was even somewhere around 44.1%. Now, on the part of wastage from both ECG and NEDCO, and of course also including enclave power, we've been seeing a consistent increment. I mean, in 2000, we were doing around 27% of electricity distribution losses alone. So out of the amount of power that was purchased from Gridco by ECG and NEDCO, then 27% of that went into costs, and this is cost that ECG incurs, and a cost that's based on ECG's books. In 2020 alone, we are doing about 26.21% of losses for all these ECG, NEDCO, and enclaves. And so there seems to be that inability of us as a nation to really clamp down on losses. The lowest we've ever had was somewhere in 2013 or 2015, where we did about 23% of losses. Since then, our figures have been way above 24%, 25%, 26%. We are expecting even the year 2021 figures to be above 26%, looking at how much power was transmitted and the effects that we saw early last year with the various power outages. And our position continues to remain that ECG can, for the purposes of generating revenue, look at how it will clamp down on these excesses in its system. Of course, if it's able to cut down on these losses, it is money that they're able to save. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, even though BRC set its benchmark at around 20%, it's so on the high side. Well, in our opinion, if you look at countries like China and US who are doing less than 10% of these losses and are able to cut down, even same, and Ghana doing way above 25%. It's just too much for a developing country like us to bear. And yes, of course, also there are institutions, governments, state-owned, MMDAs, who owe so much to ECG that we believe that if they were able to look at all those alternative sources of revenue, it would have been way better by now. But of course, there's a need for consistent review of tariffs if we really want the operators to work and we don't want to overburden the consumers like they are currently seeing in the previous time.
Indeed, ECG mentions that it will procure more smart meters to help in its revenue growth, enhance it. And also, it will utilize prosecution processes to help improve revenue collection during the period. And so you've just mentioned that we need to pay realistic tariffs. But here we are as a people, we are always opting for subsidies. Governments make promises over time to have these utilities reduced to ease the burden on consumers. We know for a fact that MMDAs also owe government. Would it be right to then say, or ECG, right to then say, can we allow these people to settle the ECG before you carry over the effect of their inaction on the ordinary citizen?
Well, that would be an alternative to the situation. I mean, it could be one of the remedies that ECG can take, and I believe it will be incumbent on ECG to do the same. I mean, it would help it if it really wants to ensure efficiency in its revenue generation. And of course, the task force that currently has been put in place isn't the first time, I should say. I mean, we've seen these efforts in times past where ECG has begun its operations like this to cut down or take in costs, debts that have been owed it, but haven't been able to do so. And we are showing where we are now. And so I believe that going forward, of course, ECG can look at that option and other means of ensuring that these people or agencies that owe it so much can really cut down on their costs or their debts that they owe to ECG.
Mr. Moses, Benjamin here. I took stock of something you said initially when engaging with Bernice. You spoke about political influence, even in terms of the tariff arrangements. What exactly did you mean?
Well, I mean, you know, it's the practice and the culture for GL to engage ECG, NETCO, all the major utility service providers each year to review the tariffs. Because, I mean, every year we see how the economy is advancing, how operations of these operators or utility companies are increasing, the operation costs are increasing, and how they need to revise what they are charging consumers. And so if those things are not done, where we get to see marginal increments, like I stated earlier, somewhere in 2017, where we were charging around 79 per kilowatt of hour, and it was revised in 2018 to 70 pesos, 2019 to 71 pesos. In 2020, we saw the free electricity, free water that we all enjoyed and came to might matters in the back a month after. These are the examples, or these are the things that we think shouldn't be encouraged in the determination of tariffs, in the computations of things, and how they actually affect the operations of these operators.
So when you look, for example, at Bernice, I see you have a question there, but when you look, for example, at what we did in the period of COVID, and we spoke about subsidies as well, was that apt? Are we having to pay through our noses for what we basically enjoyed for free, which, well, wasn't gratis, so to speak?
Well, that's together with our inability or the inability of PRC to review its tariffs, the tariffs of these operators for the past 4 or 5 years. It's what is coming back to bite us now in the foot. And that's an unfortunate situation, because you look, for example, like fuel prices, where in 2020, we were selling fuel at around 4 cities, 42%. It's currently around 3 cities, over 3 cities, 90%, over 9 cities, 30%. But had it been that the increments were sudden like we are currently seeing, we would have all complained and spoken about it like we are now. But if it had been that increment, I mean, because it was incremental, market forces were determining prices for themselves, international markets were determining prices, the local city was also determining prices, and so periodically, we're seeing the increments, and where it was necessary, the decrease in prices. And so we currently do not have to complain, because we know that it is the market forces that have determined the current rate. But if we had, this is the same case also with the electricity charges or tariffs, we wouldn't have been complaining currently. And we believe that the prices or the tariffs that these operators are requesting wouldn't have been the figures that they are churning out now, because it would have been reflective of the market then.
So the company, that's ECG, is also proposing a street light tariff. And it says that this is to help it properly account for the full cost of street lights consumption. But we know there's an already existing levy for street lights. In fact, in 2010, August 2010, Energy Minister Peter Mewu told us that a total amount of 273 million cedis, 876,832 cedis was collected by the ECG, NEDCO, and VRA. For someone sitting at home saying, look, I've been paying this all the time, now you are... Hello? Hello? Mr.
I think...
Hello, Fritz?
Yes. Hello,
Well,
didn't get the latter part. Can you hear me?
sorry, I can hear you. Yes, I'm talking about the proposal to have us pay for street lights, so street light tariff. ECG wants to introduce that. It says it will help it properly account for street light consumption. But there is an existing street light levy that we're already paying for.
Yes.
So how do we reconcile the two? I mean, what's the difference there?
Yes. It's interesting you mentioned the previous levy and the new one that's being introduced. It's one of the... Tomorrow we will be meeting with PRSM. You will seek to ask ECG why they are including some of these new tariffs or new charges in their request for review. I mean, together with other questions, we would seek to understand the position of ECG, and also, of course, also present our position on how best we think they can meet their revenue targets. Because essentially, what they are doing, whatever the cost of these increments or suggestions or requests from ECG and the other network operators, is to increase their revenue. And so we are looking at other alternative sources of increasing revenue, not necessarily tied to the tariffs that consumers or the average consumer is charged on their consumption of electricity in the country.
So, Benjamin, I'll let you come in there, but let me just ask you this one. Currently, we're dealing with fuel price increment, we're dealing with transport fares, even prices of goods on the market are increasing by the day. What would your candid advice be? Do we pay these, what ECG and Ghana Water Company Limited refer to as realistic tariffs? Do we pay it, I mean, through our noses, allow ourselves to go through this process so that we can stabilize the system? Or you would say that there is room for some sort of negotiation for a subsidy to ease the burden on citizens?
Hello, Fritz.
Hello, Benjamin. Yes. So what I was saying was, yes, we are going to see more increments with fuel prices, and of course the factors hasn't been the local economy or the local market forces determine what the prices should be. But then again, our reliance on the international market is what's causing these increments. And so if there's any efforts by government locally to stall the increments or the increases or the factors causing the increases from the local market, from the international market, then we'd have to see how, we have suggested one is government to look at how to increase our buffer, our strategic reserves here, so that rather than relying solely on the international market when these issues of price increments are happening, we can fall on the local, the strategic reserve that we have here to stabilize prices a bit.
So what
we've made a call in years past that it's important for us to start the conversations or even start to work on revamping and increasing operations of the oil refinery to locally refine the oil that we are producing here. Because that's the only way we can actually be we can self-determine our prices or stabilize prices in Ghana, free from the international market conditions.
So would you say, I think you have a follow-up there, do you?
So that's back to my question about whether we as a people should allow ourselves to go through this process, because I did mention that we're paying more for fuel, we're paying more for transport, and even for things like egg and milk and sugar. So do we allow ourselves to go through this process? Because the ECG says you need to pay the right tariffs for us to grow, for us to sustain the sector. Or is there room for subsidy to ease the burden on the citizen?
I mean, we've had conversations from government that government needs revenue. It's not rather willing to rather give away revenues. And so I really doubt that subsidies from government would be the way the position of government may be. I can't, of course, speak of government's position, but I really doubt that subsidies would suffice. But what I believe we can do is for us to, it's like what we've been saying, there's a need for engagement, because whatever the situation may be, whatever the increments the various operators or institutions are asking for, there can be some management of those to ensure that whereas they are getting their targets or they are meeting some of their targets, we the consumers who are not overburdened. Because essentially you can't we can't put all the blame on or all the cost on the consumers just to meet the revenue targets for these operators.
Fritz, a quick one. You spoke about market prices earlier. These increments, yes, there are other factors in there, but are they reflective of market prices? You've spoken about fuel inching over 9 cedis and all of that. In fact, diesel, which a lot of equipment uses, is over 11 cedis. I get that. But are these reflective? 148%, 334%. Considering also that the ordinary Ghanaian, in terms of his or her economic fortunes, they have not changed much. Are these realistic? I know the PURC will eventually have to decide with these bodies, but are these reflective of the reality?
Well, for the electricity tariffs, we believe that they are rather on the higher side. I mean, we look at how, of course, we understand that the economies of 2018 and 2019 in Ghana is not the same as 2022, and so things have necessarily increased. But the rate of increment, we believe, is on the higher side. Looking at the 148, 343% increment these operators are asking for.
Is it just the electricity? Because you mentioned electricity. Is it both electricity and water, or just electricity that you feel is on the high side? And if so, what is your justification?
Yes, you feel for electricity and water, both of them are actually on the higher side. And there could have been, of course, these are proposals from their end. And so when we meet them tomorrow with PURC, we believe that we can discuss and see how we can present our position on what we think should be considered by them to in the final review.
So
right.
What for you will be realistic?
It's one thing we want to discuss with them and come to conclusion.
Sure.
We don't want it to be. We don't want to have a different position exactly from what they are presented, but we want to agree with them that these are things that they would also see reason with.
Right, so that was exactly what I was also going to put to you, that if you say these are unrealistic, then, because you may call them unrealistic, but they are what they have asked for. And if the ECG and the Ghana Water Company Limited were given those, they wouldn't say no, they would accept it. So it would be interesting to find out what you would call realistic. But can you at least give us a range? The ECG is looking at some 148%. What range would you have said would be a good one? We have these conversations. Would 50%, 100%? Is that 148? Is it too far out? At 334% for water, is it too far out? I mean, where would you have said would be a safe range to be in?
Looking at how the figures are now, but I can't state exactly what range the best range would be. But we believe these current figures, are rather on the higher side. And when we meet them tomorrow and discuss with them, you would see, of course, the final proposal that we will submit.
We'll see, Fritz, but I'm interested. I mean, you cannot say it's on the high side without having in your mind some sort of range or where you feel it would have been reasonable, so to speak, and I'm using this word loosely, to peg it at. So you must have something at the back of your mind that you would have, or you would go into the discourse with. That is what I just want you to share with us.
Yes, Benjamin, and my position too is, and of course our position remains that we want to first engage with them and then come out conclusively on that range. We don't want to put it out and then expect that they'll come and rebut, but we want to just engage them and discuss with them and see reasons, for them to see reasons with us. But certainly it wouldn't be the figures that we are currently seeing, not at all.
I have a two-pronged question to wrap on this specific bit. So first of all, the connectivity to our electricity grid, it still leaves a lot to be desired, even in the 21st century. I recall years back, there was this town that for over 5 centuries had never had electricity, and they were now getting electricity in 21st century Ghana. So when you contemplate that, how much more do you feel we should be looking at in terms of better services and expanded services across the country? The other side of the question is, we also have excess capacity when it comes to electricity. How can we zero in on that to cut down our cost? Because if we were sharing it with other countries and others, we would also be able to lower our tariffs. What is your take?
Yes. So, Benjamin, it's true. I mean, we don't have a 100% electricity coverage in Ghana, although we are doing fairly well compared to other countries surrounding or bordering us. We are doing around 86% now. But the unfortunate situation is the remaining 14% are in areas that are hard to reach by ECG and NEDCO lines. And so we're looking at communities around the lakeside, around riverside, that can only get access to the grid with the use of renewable energy. And so that has been our call for some time now, that it will be important for government to reconsider its moratorium on renewable energy and power purchases, especially for renewable energy power sources. And so if we do that, then it means that we're able to bring on board all these communities that still do not have access to electricity. Several of them, I mean, about 3 million Ghanaians still do not have electricity, like you stated. And so bringing them on board will certainly increase the revenue stream for these operators, be it ECG, Bui Power, or NEDCO. But of course, that alone would not be enough to generate the revenues that ECG is expecting to increase it or to ensure its efficiency. We believe that, of course, there are several institutions that owe so much to ECG, that if ECG itself and with NEDCO and VRA are willing and interested in fighting for or collecting these revenues, they can increase their efficiency in the operation. I mean, making losses of about 26% on power purchase each year is mind-boggling. It's not something we should be encouraging at all.
Right. Maybe from my end, just to wrap this entire conversation, Fritz. So we see that the ECG is attributing the high increase in the distribution service charge to the gap that has developed over the years. They cite 2019, 2022 as well. They are talking about the cost of completed projects and all of that. Would it also be right to say then that if there is an increment, even if it is halfway through what they are expecting, we should also expect better service delivery? I mean, from the standpoint of the IES, is that something you would also negotiate, push for come tomorrow?
Certainly. I mean, whenever there's a review of tariffs, there's also a review of service that has been rendered during the years past or the period preceding the review. And so if you're looking at how effective ECG service has been, like I've stated, we haven't seen that efficiency, because even though our generation, our transmission of power has increased from around 3,600 megawatts to currently over 5,000 megawatts for the generation and about 3,400 for power peak demand, we haven't seen that commensurate efficiency, increment in efficiency for the distribution part, where from around 28% of losses to ECG in 2020, 2017-18, we have seen around 26% in 2020, and we expect even more, about 27% in 2021. These are not things that we will take lightly, because if you are paying more, then we expect that there will be an efficiency in the delivery of the power to our homes and our offices.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. Fritz Moses is energy analyst, and we'll reach out to you once that meeting between yourself, the PULC, and the utility providers is done.